This is A Story of Sorts, the podcast mostly about bookish stuff, and I am your host, Karina Pereira. Hello everyone and welcome to another Footnotes, and today I am going to talk about the books that I have read in February. So February was, reading-wise, a month that was more or less normal to me. So I read the amount of books that I consider, at least since last year or since a couple of years, more or less normal for my reading habits. And that was exactly 7 books. I've read a few in print, I've read a few digitally, and of course I've read a few audiobooks. So I started the month with a graphic novel, and that was How to Be Ace by Rebecca Burgess. I think I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, Burgess, I think. I picked up this book because I am always looking for more books with ace representation, since the only book I've read with ace representation was Loveless by Alice Oseman. But I feel like there isn't a lot of books for adults that talk about being ace. There are fiction. So there are a couple of books, of course, that actually have sexual characters. Some of them, like for example, On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan. I cannot say the word beach today without sounding like bitch. So I'm not even going to try it. But anyway, that book specifically has for sure a sexual character, but it is never named that she is asexual. So there aren't a lot of books, as I said, with the sexual characters, with the sexual representation for adults in fiction. This one is a really nice graphic novel. I really love that the author actually talks about, it is also memoir, so the author talks about her experience, kind of realizing who she was, what she was, and why she didn't feel the kind of feelings that her colleagues and friends felt. So in some ways, it reminded me a lot of Loveless, but it is very distinct from Loveless. And then we actually see her throughout, her youth. So as a child and then as a teenager, but also as an adult when she was already working, doing comics, and even later in life. So I think this was very interesting. And I think it's the kind of book that will be good for, any age pretty much, at least, young adults and also adults. But of course it is a graphic novel. So once again, it is not fiction either. So I'm still looking for fiction books with ace representation that are, directed to actually adults. But as a graphic novel, I really enjoyed this one, and I would definitely recommend it to people who want to read more about ace people and more, a story with ace representation, even though, again, it is not fiction, it is non-fiction. The second book I've read was Magpie by Elizabeth Day, and I've seen this book in many bookstores and going around a little bit on social media, and I picked it up because I got an advanced reading copy, even though the book was already out, even when I requested. I don't get it either, but it was via Edelweiss Plus, and I asked for it, got granted, read it. I liked the plot a lot. It's one of those books that really keeps you guessing, like, okay, I am being played here, but I don't know who's playing me exactly. So there's basically, there are 3 main characters. I don't want to ruin the plot, because if I tell a lot and if I talk too much about these 3 main characters, it's going to be a bit complicated, not to ruin it. But basically there's this couple and they move to a new house, but then, financially things are not so good. So they decide to take a lodger. And then it comes to a point in which you don't know anymore who is telling the truth, who is telling a lie, who is actually living that life or not. And then I enjoyed that a lot, even though honestly, by the end, I was expecting already another plot twist. But I do like the way that the plot was wrapped up. I did not like the writing so much. I think I gave this one 3.5, or I don't think I gave it 4 stars. I think it was 3.5, because of the writing style. Because I think the story itself had a lot of promise, and it kind of, it fulfilled that promise, I think, in some sense. But writing-wise, I was not engaged in it, and I don't really know what didn't work. The dialogues were okay, but just, the writing style was just not really my thing. And therefore, I gave it 3 stars. I've been looking for end-of-the-world fiction, because I've read a couple of books that I really liked Station 11, Moon of the Crusted Snow, which was amazing. And then, so when I asked, someone recommended to me Wilder Girls by Rory Power. And this I listened to in audiobook form and I really enjoyed it. I had heard about the book before, and actually what I had heard is that people were dissatisfied with the open ending. They said it was like sort of like a cliffhanger, and people really disliked that. And I remember people talking about it specifically on social media. But I was like, okay, you know what? I got a recommendation from someone that I trust with book recommendations, so I'm just going to go ahead and give it a try, especially because there is a sapphic romance in it. And this is one of the things that I really enjoy. The book, the main plot of the book has nothing to do with the romance. It just happens to be a romance in there between these two girls, like so many dystopic books have. Because, like, for example, The Hunger Games. Okay, there is the love triangle, but in truth, that is not what The Hunger Games is about, right? And a lot of stories have a love plot within the plot of the book. And this is what happens here. And it happens to be between two girls. So it was like just super casual and super normal in the book. And I really like this. I really like the fact that you're just reading a book in which a queer couple happens to be in, just like, you know, when you're going around doing your thing as a human being in the world. And this is the story about a bunch of girls that are at the school, and there's like a virus, and the virus has attacked the school and the world around it. So in order to be more protected, these girls live in the school, and then they get rations, food, etc. from the outside world. But then stuff starts happening inside the school. Again, not ruining the plot, but I really liked it. The ending is not a cliffhanger, it is simply an open ending. So it's like they get to a point in which you don't really know what happens next, so you can kind of figure out yourself or just make up a story yourself. But I don't think it is a cliffhanger, and honestly, I did not feel like there was something missing from the book. I think it stopped where it should stop. It was good. The story was good up until then, and then the rest is up for you to imagine, or maybe there will be a sequel, who knows. But I honestly didn't think I was missing something from having that open ending. So I'm really happy that I actually gave it a try, because I really enjoy this book. Sense and Second Degree Murder by Tirza Price. This is my second book by Tirza, and the first one was Pride and Prejudice retelling. This one is, as the title suggests, Sense and Sensibility retelling, but it is also a murder mystery. I must say that I don't know anything, absolutely nothing about Sense and Sensibility. Like when I went into Tirza's first book, so basically this is a trilogy and there are all murder mysteries. When I went into Pride and Premeditation, the first one, I knew enough about Pride and Prejudice to know who the characters were and what were the role in the book. Not all of them, but at least the main ones, you know. And in Sense and Sensibility, I knew nothing about the characters, and honestly, I didn't miss it because I got to know the characters in this retelling, and the murder was really interesting. It puts women in a position of power and going against the rules of the time and what was expected for women to do at the time, which I really love. It's not like, oh, women do this right now at this time. It's like, women shouldn't do it, but these are doing it and they're gonna do it. So they go against the rules of society. And then I really like the plot and the plot twists in it. And again, I could really thoroughly enjoy it, even though I knew nothing about the original that is based on, and I really like the writing. So this book comes out in April, if I am not mistaken, so next month. And honestly, if you like Jane Austen, or even if you don't, I could really recommend this trilogy. I haven't read the last one. I'm not even sure it's written yet, but I've definitely read the first two and I've enjoyed them. It's one of those books that really keeps you wanting to read more and figuring out what happened. I actually read it in just 3 or 4 days and it was really, really enjoyable. The next book that I've read was it was an audiobook, and it was one book that I saw going around so much on Instagram. Like everybody was sharing the book at the time, and I thought, you know what, I have this as an audiobook via Libro FM with their advanced listening copies, because I am part of the program. And I was like, okay, I want to read something by this author, so why not start here? Except that this was not the first book that I've read by the author. And the author is Louise Erdrich. I actually read The Night Watchman a while ago when she won I think she won the Pulitzer Prize for it. But I thought it was this one, The Sentence, was the first book that I've read by her. But it was not. But still, I liked this one, The Sentence, more than I like the other one. And the other one was really good. This one talks about, like, there's this main character and her name is Tuki and she's a native woman and she goes to jail because she does a favor for a friend. And when you start listening to the book, you think that this situation, the fact that she did this favor for that friend and she went to jail, is going to have a very big impact on the plot, that the plot is going to basically be around that. But no, that is just the beginning of the book. And then she's out of prison and eventually she gets a job as a bookseller. And I know that the author has a bookshop herself, but the way that she describes that Tuki talks about the job and the clients, it's hilarious. I was laughing. I was on my way to work on my bike listening to the book and I was laughing because in some ways it's so on point and so funny that I could kind of like see my own job in it. And I don't know, it was just really fun. But then the plot is something else. The plot, and I loved it because it has ghosts. So not in a scary way, just like in a urban fantasy kind of way, which I love. But then there's like this one customer of the bookstore that died. And she was the most annoying customer that they had. But you know how when sometimes there's like this person that is very annoyed, but then the person stops coming in and you kind of miss them in some way, even though it makes no sense because you dislike them a lot. I was going to say hate, but maybe that's a bit too much. But you dislike that person because they were a pain in the butt. But at the same time, they just fill your days with something and you can't really pinpoint what is it, but you just enjoy it. Well, this client is dead, but she isn't going anywhere and she's haunting the bookstore, specifically Tuki. So now Tuki has to find a way to get rid of the haunting. But the book is so much more than this. The book is about, of course, selling books in a bookstore and being a bookseller, but it talks about native literature and it talks about Black Lives Matter. It talks about the pandemic. So there's a part in the book that is specifically about the pandemic. And I just loved how up to date, how actual, and how fun though the book was, because it was still very fun and super enjoyable. And it's probably already one of the best books I've read this year. I don't know how the list is gonna end up, especially because I read it in February. I have a tendency at the end of the year to forget the books that I've read at the beginning of the year, but this one is really, really good. So if you're seeing it on your timeline and you're considering picking it up, please do. It's worth it. No Filter and Other Lies by Cristal Maldonado. I interviewed Cristal for season 2 of the podcast, so last year. I think it's episode 9, if I am not mistaken. And at the time, I talked with her about her debut novel, young adult novel, which was Fat Chance Charlie Vega. I really liked that one as well. And actually, at the end of the episode, we go into No Filter and Other Lies a little bit, even though, of course, she couldn't, just talk too much about it. But we do talk about her new book that she was writing at the time. And the book is finally out. It's been out since the 8th of February, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And this book I actually liked more than the previous one. I don't know exactly why, but I was really involved in the story of this one as well. And I think I enjoy the theme more, even though there are some themes, or at least one theme that I recognize also from the first one. And Crystal talked about it also on the podcast episode, which is the relationship with the mother of the main character. And the main character, which of course I already forgot the name, even though I've read it, just a month ago. I forgot the name of the main character. But she is bisexual, she is a fat brown girl, and, she is in school. And she starts getting a bit addicted to social media, because she is also a photographer and she posts her things, but she feels like she's not getting enough attention on Instagram, that she doesn't have enough followers, that she doesn't have enough likes, that all of her posts flop, even though she is spending a lot of time and taking a lot of time to, to curate her own timeline. And then she decides, she has this friend that she works at because she works at a dog's shelter. And she has this friend that is very beautiful. And that friend used to be on social media. She used to be, very famous, very popular on social media. And then she quit and she said, I don't want to do that anymore. And then she takes her photos. They do like a couple of photo shoots. And she decides one evening, like, what if I pick up a photo and I create a quote that I wouldn't put on my own profile because people don't see me like that. And I create this whole fake profile and see if people like it more. So I can understand what's the issue, what's not working on my account. And she does exactly that. And then, like, as one lie, there's another lie, there's another lie. And yeah, in the meantime, she is like wrapped up in lies that she does not know how to untie. But there's a good resolution in the book as well, but not everything ends up being perfect. So at the end of the book, things are kind of solved, but not everything is solved for the best, or at least not the best for her. Which it's understandable. And then there's also the relationship with her friends and her family. So there is a lot of nuance without being too overcrowded. So the plot was really well done. The only thing I think sometimes is that I find in other books, I found this in Cemetery Boys, I found this in Queenie, is that sometimes the wrapping up at the end is a bit too perfect. Or things go bad for a long time in the book, and then at the end, things kind of start getting really good and getting wrapped up. And I don't always enjoy that. I think sometimes that makes me feel like this is too much lucky-go-lucky to end a book, or at least lucky-go-lucky for what I enjoy in a book. And that happened a little bit here, but like I said, not too much. I still enjoy the book a lot, but if I had to point out something about this book is also that I truly enjoyed it. And if you haven't read anything by Crystal Maldonado, you can start with this one, or you can go to her debut novel. It's never like, both options are really good, even though I did like this one better. And yeah, if you're interested also to find out more about her writing process, etc., just check out the 9th episode of A Story of Swords season 2. The last book was an audiobook, and it was recommended to me by Liana, by the Base Book Space. So I also interviewed her in February, so the episode is already out, and she has a few book recommendations because she has a bookstore and she's curating that bookstore. She is reading everything that she has online for sale. And she recommended Aftershocks by Nadia Obuzo. And honestly, I love getting to know people, either they're famous or not, through memoirs. And this is an amazing memoir. It has a lot to do with race. It teaches you a lot about colonialism, etc. But it's also in its, in its core, it's a memoir about a person and about the things they went through with their parents, with her father, her mother, her stepmother, her sister, in her life, kind of like figuring out what she wanted to do with her life, kind of feeling sometimes like a fraud. So there's a lot in this book and a lot of interesting themes, but it's also a history lesson. So you learn a lot through that person's, the way that she grew up and her culture, her ethnicities, and her life experience, which I really appreciated. It's a bit complicated sometimes to talk about memoirs because, unlike fiction, you're just talking about the life of someone. But if you like memoirs, I really recommend this one because I thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, at times it's complicated to hear because, the things she went through and the pain and trauma that goes with it, of course, sometimes it's a bit difficult to listen to. But on the other hand, it is so interesting. And especially like when you see an author being so vulnerable and so open, you can learn so much from them. So I truly enjoyed this one. And it was the last book I've read last month. And I can really recommend it as well. So this was it. Those were the books that I have read in February. March is being a really, really slow month, so for reading at least. So we'll see how things turn out at the end of the month. But I've been really happy with the books that I've been picking up. Again, February I've read 7 books if I'm not mistaken, and I liked every single one of them. Like Magpie was the one I liked the least, but there isn't a book that I thought, oh my god, this was so bad. No, I really enjoyed all of them. So once again, everybody knows, if you want to see my reviews on the spot, usually as I read the books, you can always follow me on Instagram. I will leave on the outro all of the links so you can follow them and come talk to me about books. So this is the cue for the outro. Bye bye! You can access today's show's notes via my pod page, which you can find along with all of my social media links at linktree/Carina Pereira. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting A Story of Sorts on Patreon. Patreon is a platform which allows you to contribute monthly to the podcast in exchange for extra content, such as early access to episodes, a shout out at the end of an episode and on Instagram, and choosing a theme for me to talk about on the podcast. You can become a patron at patreon.com/A Story of Sorts. Leaving a review would also be highly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to get a notification when the next episode hits. I'll talk to you then, and thank you for listening.